It started with a question no one expected. Not from a comedian, not from a host who built his brand on satire and safety. But Stephen Colbert wasn't smiling now, not really. His words were sharp, his tone just soft enough to hide the blade. And then he said it. "Senator Kennedy, how does it feel knowing millions believe you've betrayed your country?" Time stopped. You could hear it in the air, that high-pitched quiet, the kind that comes just before a storm. The studio lights, warm and blinding, suddenly felt like interrogation lamps. The crowd's laughter didn't fade, it choked, uncertain, shallow, nervous. Senator John Kennedy didn't flinch, didn't shift in his seat. His suit jacket barely creased as he leaned into the moment, not away from it. He looked Colbert in the eye, not with hostility, not with fear, but with something much more dangerous: stillness. "You ever hear silence that ain't empty?" Stephen Kennedy said. "That's what truth feels like before it breaks." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was sacred. It was the kind of silence that makes people listen whether they want to or not. That moment wasn't planned. It wasn't part of the script the producers had triple-checked. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And with it, the tone of the entire night shifted, because Kennedy didn't dodge. He didn't change the subject or throw a joke back. He didn't reach for applause or play to a bass. He did something rarer. He stood his ground and fired back. You could feel the fracture in the room. Not a break, not yet, but a slow, stretching tension. Like the earth just before it splits. The audience leaned forward, almost unconsciously. For a second, they forgot they were supposed to laugh. Because for the first time that night, something real was happening. Colbert blinked, just once, a flicker, then he smirked, a little forced now. "So, just to be clear, Senator, you're not denying the accusation?" Kennedy's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It cut cleaner in the quiet. "I'm denying the lie," he said. "There's a difference." There were no cheers, no gasps, just listening. Because somewhere, deep down, everyone in that room knew this wasn't about politics anymore. This was about something else. Conviction, honor. That strange, almost forgotten idea that truth is worth defending, even when it hurts. Backstage, producers exchanged glances. Should they cut to commercial? Kill the segment before it caught fire? But the fire had already started. And on stage, Kennedy didn't blink. He stared down the storm, like a man who's already lost things that matter, and has nothing left to lose. Colbert sat straighter, regrouping, trying to find the rhythm again. "You've questioned everything, intelligence agencies, elections, even science. What's next?" "Gravity." Kennedy let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. "Questioning ain't rebellion, Stephen," he said. "It's responsibility." The room went still again. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. Like he'd had that answer in his bones for years. The kind of truth that doesn't need to be rehearsed because it's been lived. And in that stillness, Colbert felt it too. The shift, the power of a man with nothing to sell, and no fear of being broken. He leaned in, trying again. "You've flirted with conspiracy, Senator. You've thrown gasoline on division. Do you even care what your words do to this country?" Kennedy's face hardened, not in anger, but in sorrow. "I care more than you ever will." From behind a desk built for applause, the crowd didn't know what to do. Some clapped, some stayed frozen, some just stayed. But no one laughed. Colbert sat back, just a little. The smirk had vanished. There was tension now, not fake, not rehearsed, not the usual playful sparring of a late-night show. This was real, but Colbert wasn't done. Not yet. He squared up again, his voice steadier. "That's bold coming from someone who's been accused of defending There it was. The word no one wanted to say out loud. The match. The crowd shifted. Kennedy didn't blink. "You ever sit down with a man who fought for a flag, lost his brother," he asked slowly, "and still gets called a traitor for why his country forgot him?" The studio went silent. Even the band in the shadows stilled. "I have," Kennedy continued. "I've looked those men in the eye. I've seen the confusion, the pain, not because they hate this country, but because they love it and don't recognize it anymore." Colbert tried to speak, but Kennedy raised a hand. "They're not saints," he said, "but they ain't devils either. They're broken, and we broke them." A pause. "I don't excuse violence," Kennedy added, "but I'll be damned if I excuse ignorance, too." He wasn't shouting, but somehow his voice filled every inch of the room. Colbert's expression softened, just for a second. Then he rallied. "Let's talk about race," he said. Kennedy nodded. "You've been criticized for tone-deaf remarks, outdated policies. Some say your vision of America leaves people behind." Kennedy looked down, took a breath. "I've made mistakes," he said. "Anyone who says they haven't is either a liar or a coward." Another pause. "But here's the thing," he continued. "We've got real problems, big ones, generations, deep. And you don't fix those by pretending they don't exist. Or by calling everyone who disagrees with you a bigot." He sat forward. "You fix them by code, by listening, by bleeding a little truth on the floor and hoping someone else has the guts to do the same." The crowd was with him now, not cheering, listening and feeling it. Colbert tilted his head. "So what you think being careful with our words is the problem?" Kennedy gave a tired smile. "I think being afraid of our words is," he went on. We've turned every disagreement into a moral failure. You speak wrong, you're cancelled. You ask a question, you're dangerous. And God help you if you're wrong before breakfast, 'cause the internet will crucify you before lunch. He shook his head. That ain't justice, Stephen, that's just fear with a new face. Colbert nodded slowly, then asked, but don't you worry that unchecked speech leads to hate? Kennedy looked him in the eye. I worry more about unchecked. Silence, a long beat. Then he said, you want to see where hate grows? It grows in corners, in basements, in chats where people think they can't say nothing out loud anymore, so they say worse in secret. The weight of it landed. Every word. Colbert leaned back, unusually quiet. The camera cut wide. The audience motionless and Kennedy steady. There's a difference between freedom and recklessness, he said. I get that, but we're teaching folks to lie, just to survive the news cycle. That's not progress. That's performance. Colbert cleared his throat. So what, then? We just say whatever we want, all the time. Kennedy shook his head. No, but we speak with courage. We speak knowing we might be wrong, and we listen knowing the other guy might be right. Another ripple went through the room. Real ones. Now people weren't just hearing, they were remembering. Remembering what leadership used to sound like. Not polished, not perfect, but principled. Colbert picked up a card from his lap, then put it down. He didn't need it anymore. Why do you think you raised so controversial, Senator? He asked. Kennedy smiled sadly. 'Cause I don't play for either team, meaning I ain't left enough for the left, and I ain't loud enough for the right. I'm just here trying to hold on to a country I still believe in. His voice cracked a little then. Not from weakness, from truth. And that's the loneliest place in the world right now. The audience wasn't just moved, they were changed. Colbert tried to regain the upper hand. You think people fear your honesty? Kennedy nodded. They should, because I ain't beholden to your script or theirs. I speak what I see. And what do you see now? Colbert asked. Kennedy looked directly into the camera. I see a country sleepwalking through a fire. I see people shouting at shadows, forgetting what the real enemy even looks like. And I see a future slipping through our fingers because we're too busy being right instead of good. Silence. And in that silence something sacred lived. Not politics, not performance, but presence. The storm inside Kennedy had surfaced, and it wasn't done yet. The lights felt hotter now, the stage smaller, like the air itself had thickened with tension. Colbert folded his hands. He wasn't smirking anymore. He wasn't laughing. He was listening. Kennedy leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice dropping lower. I didn't come here for applause, Stephen. I didn't come to be liked. I came because I'm tired. He looked off, not at the crowd, not at Colbert, but somewhere deeper. Tired of watching good people fall apart while the cameras roll. Tired of funerals no one covers. Of stories that only matter if they trend. He paused, of being told to smile while the ship sinks. Colbert's voice broke the stillness. Quiet, careful. Then why do you keep going? Kennedy turned back to him. Because someone's got to stay at the wheel. Colbert nodded, almost imperceptibly, then reached again. Let's go back to the Capitol riots. You were one of the few who voted against certifying the results in certain states. You stood alone. People called it treason. Kennedy's jaw tensed, his voice hardened. I stood on principle, not because I hated the outcome, but because I hated the process. Colbert raised an eyebrow. Sounds like justification. Kennedy didn't budge. Sounds like clarity, he continued. You want to talk about treason? What about trust? When millions of people don't believe their vote matters, that ain't democracy. That's decay. But the courts found no fraud. Colbert shot back, and I accepted that, Kennedy replied. But questions aren't poison. They're oxygen. Without them, we suffocate. The crowd was hushed again. It wasn't applause that hung in the air. It was tension, thick and trembling. Colbert pressed on. So you're saying questioning the system is patriotic? Kennedy nodded once. Patriotism ain't blind loyalty. It's asking the hard questions even when they make you the villain. He leaned in closer, eyes locked with Colbert's, and sometimes it means standing in the fire alone. That line landed heavy, the kind of line that doesn't echo, it sinks. Colbert searched his notes, then gave up on them. He looked at Kennedy with something different now. Respect, maybe, or maybe just the recognition of another man who understood what it meant to bleed for what you believe. You've been accused of dog whistling to extremists, Colbert said, pandering to rage. Kennedy sighed. I've been accused of a lot. Some of it true, some of it twisted. He folded his hands. I've spoken in places you wouldn't walk into, Stephen. VFW halls, broken school gyms, town meetings with 15 people and bad coffee. He looked at the camera again. You want to know what rage looks like? It's a father working 2 jobs and still can't afford his daughter's insulin. It's a veteran whose benefits dried up when the headlines moved on. It's a farmer watching foreign companies buy the land under his boots. A long breath. They're not angry because they're hateful. They're angry because they're invisible. The silence was painful. Colbert's next question came softer. Do you ever regret it? The votes, the stands, the backlash. Kennedy nodded. Regret. Yeah, I regret every time I kept my mouth shut when I should have spoken louder. Every time I chose diplomacy over decency. He looked down, and I regret thinking the truth would be enough. Colbert's face changed. He didn't have a comeback for that. Kennedy continued. They don't want the truth, Stephen. They want comfort, reassurance, something to soothe them while the world burns a beat. But the truth ain't soft. It don't tuck you in at night. It wakes you up. The camera closed in slowly. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. If telling it makes me the enemy, so be it. Then for the first time all night, Colbert went quiet. Not clever, not composed, just quiet. The audience didn't move. The staff backstage didn't blink. This was no longer television. This was confession. Colbert's voice cracked, just slightly. You sound like a man carrying a burden. Kennedy's answer came slow. I am. Colbert waited. Kennedy finished. I carry the weight of everything I didn't say sooner. A breath, and everything I still might not get the chance to say. Then, without warning, he stood. The camera followed. Colbert looked up at him. Kennedy took a step forward. Want a headline? Fine. Write this down. The entire room stilled. Kennedy looked into the camera. I don't want your votes. I don't need your approval, but I'll give you the one thing nobody else will. The truth, even when it burns both of us. That silence roared, because in that moment, it wasn't a speech. It was a stand. A live wire of defiance wrapped in sorrow and grit. And even Colbert, master of the camera, didn't know how to follow it.